the Angkor Temple of Bayon, built later by Jayavarman VII, there's a vivid depiction of the day's fighting. The relief shows Sham soldiers shot by arrows, floating in the water, and torn to pieces by crocodiles. That old saying, history is written by the victors, was certainly true in the late 12th century. Almost everything we know about Jayavarman VII comes from inscriptions written during his reign. The passages are likely propaganda, but they do tell us a lot about life at that time. For example, we know that Jayavarman VII was a powerful king who broke with tradition in many ways. He became a devout Buddhist and was a compassionate ruler who put the needs and comfort of his people first. In 1181 AD, 3 years after the defeat of the Sham, Jayavarman VII was crowned king. He was likely accompanied by his queen, said to be as wise as the greatest learned men. When Jayavarman VII took the crown, his subjects swore an oath of loyalty to him. So began the reign of Jayavarman VII, considered one of the greatest rulers in the history of the Khmer Empire. But when Jayavarman VII ascended the throne, his people were in despair, and his kingdom lay in ruins. The new king quickly undertook a series of massive projects to restore and rebuild the capital city. First, he built a substantial defensive wall around the heart of the city, replacing a wooden parapet. Then he restored the moat surrounding the city and made it deeper. The enormous moat measured 400 feet across and was connected to the complex system of Angkor's waterways. By restoring the moat and installing the massive 30-foot-high wall, he made his city into an impregnable fortress which no invader could breach. This new wall defined Angkor Thom, Jayavarman's royal city built within the ancient Angkor region. Angkor Thom means great city, and even now, its parameters are distinctly outlined in the Cambodian jungle. The walls enclose the city 4 miles square, enormous by 12th century standards, and roughly 4 times the size of Paris at that time. To enter the city, then as now, visitors had to cross a wide bridge. Called the Naga, or Serpent Bridge, the South Gate Causeway is guarded on the left side by 54 evil spirits holding onto a giant snake. On the right side, 54 devas, or benevolent gods, do the same. This Serpent Bridge is an echo of the famous Hindu legend of the churning of the Sea of Milk. At the end of the bridge is a 75-foot-high tower called a Gopura. This traditional gate signifies the entrance to a holy city. Inside the gate lay a sprawling metropolis with great temples and public squares, as well as the ornate royal palace. This is the Terrace of the Elephants, the entrance to the royal palace. Though only the foundation remains, the impressive stone terrace once served as the royal reviewing stand for public ceremonies. Life-size statues and reliefs of elephants grace both sides of the central terrace. The images are appropriate because the square was also used to train combat elephants for battle. The king presided over public events from here, at the center of the terrace. Statues of a lion and the Naga, a mythical serpent, stand on either side of the king's platform. Mythical birds called Garudas support the terrace from beneath. On the north side of the terrace is a carving associated with a well-known legend. Called the Terrace of the Leper King, some believe it depicts a king who beheaded a subject for refusing to kneel before him. Infected by his subject's blood, the legendary king became a leper himself. On the other side of the square stand 12 stone towers called Prusat sur Prat. This area may have been used as a court for judging those accused of wrongdoing. The terrace was once a splendid public space, ringed with covered galleries gleaming in the sun. Jayavarman VII restored the palace within Angkor Thom. The palace was originally built in the 9th century, but burned down during the war. Until recently, the original appearance of the palace was a mystery. Aside from the gopura leading to the main entranceway and the 13-foot-high surrounding wall, the palace itself no longer stands. To learn more, French archaeologists drilled thousands of holes in the ground and analyzed the soil samples from here. We now know that the palace was built on top of a large wooden foundation, only fragments of which survive. This piece was 40 to 50 centimeters wide, 13 to 16 feet in length, about 8 inches in thickness and very sturdy. This was used as a foundation, and structures were built on top of this platform. The entire palace covered 37 acres. Its wooden columns are long gone, but it's often possible to see where they once stood. Other evidence of the placement of these columns is found throughout this area, indicated by stone foundations and indentations.
All the buildings here, the palace was built in wooden construction, and maybe they copied the techniques of bonding of pieces of stone from the wood construction.
The buildings of the palace would have been connected by splendid high-ceiling galleries supported by the columns. A row of columns 31 inches in diameter once stood on top of this stone platform. These columns were built with local trees called sloram and koki, which are so dense they sink in water. These sturdy supports held up a gallery roof, which did not survive. But history left us an invaluable description of the palace's facade. Near the end of the 13th century, a Chinese diplomat named Zhou Daguan was sent to the Khmer Empire and ended up staying for 11 months. The memoir he wrote about life in Angkor Thom is still a valuable resource for historians. In his book, The Customs of Cambodia, Zhou writes, "The main hall of the palace was covered with lead tiles. The rest had stone tiles, while the columns were engraved with images of the Buddha." This building had a two-layered roof, which was covered in shingles. As you can see here, most of the shingles were glazed. They were painted yellow or a greenish yellow, and along with porcelain, this was often used in the 10th century. Zhou Daguan's account reveals that the inside rooms of the palace were so heavily guarded he could not set foot in them. He could only glimpse the king from outside. But there are clues in a relief carved on the eastern side of the Bayon Temple, which records the lifestyle of the royal family. Splendid beams ornamented with flames decorate the eaves and the shingled roof, and the pattern is likely repeated inside the palace. Zhou Daguan also recorded what he saw of the king's chamber from far away. there is a golden window there, and below the window is the image of an elephant. For the first time ever, all these clues allow us to recreate what the palace may have looked like at the height of the Khmer Empire. The palace had many luxuries. Though it's now a children's swimming pool, this was once a royal outdoor bath, 50 yards wide and 100 yards long. Wooden galleries surrounded the bath on all sides and connected it to the other buildings. And Zhou Deguan mentioned what he saw here. There are 3,005 concubines and ladies-in-waiting living inside the palace. They bathe completely nude. And unlike most other people here, their skin is as pale as white jade. In the 13th century, the Angkor area supported a large population. Zhou Deguan writes that the people spent their leisure time watching cockfights and other entertainments. And, he said, they had plenty to eat. Zhou also wrote that in the countryside and rice fields were herds of thousands of wild water buffalo. Zhou retold an interesting old legend about a mystical snake called a Naga, which figures heavily in Khmer mythology. This story is set in the 10th century in the temple of Pimianakas, which means Palace of the Heavens. Inside the soaring palace is a secret temple. There are many wonderful places within the palace, Zhou wrote. And at nighttime, the king would always visit the tower. In the middle of the tower lived the spirit of a snake with 9 heads. And every night, this snake would turn into a beautiful woman. The king would bed this woman each night. And during this time, even the queen was forbidden to enter. And if the king neglected to visit this woman, even for a single night, a calamity would befall the kingdom without question. Jayavarman VII would have known this old tale, as well as others from Khmer mythology. But he differed from nearly every previous Khmer king because he was a Buddhist. Together with his queen, he performed a sacred ritual every May called Bathing the Buddha. Jayavarman VII very much admired an earlier Khmer king, Suryavarman II, who ruled 80 years previously. This was the revered Khmer ruler who ushered in a golden age and built the great temple, Angkor Wat.